jump on in. Are y'all having a good time yet? Oh, in that King George song, when he said, you'll see, you threw your tea into the sea, what was he referring to?
Boston Tea Party.
Yeah, the Boston Tea Party. 1,000 prof points to whoever said that. So we ended with the First Continental Convention meeting to originally revise the poor little Articles of Confederation. But as soon as they got there, I believe it was James Madison who led in a motion that we chunk the articles into the trash and come up with a whole new government system. And the delegates unanimously agreed. Although those from the smaller states, remember, because the smaller states had just as much influence as the big states, the smaller states were not completely on board with that, but they got outvoted. Let me once again make this a tad bit larger. So the first Constitutional Convention began in May of 1787 in Philadelphia, and they met throughout the whole summer because, once again, they were giving the Articles of Confederation the boot and writing an entire new constitution. So they met summertime in Philly, no air conditioning, it was very hot, very uncomfortable conditions, but they, and you can see how they dressed back then, they didn't wear shorts and tank tops. So they met and hammered out the new Constitution. Now the material that will go along with this begins on page 32. And I haven't mentioned it yet, but I'm just going to mention it in passing. You can read about it on page 32. Be familiar with the little rebellion called Shays' Rebellion. Shays' Rebellion was kind of the, you know, during those 6 years where we had the Articles, after the war ended, the Articles were, excuse me, sorry. Didn't have my phone on silent. After the war ended, remember, the Articles, they were really exposed, their weakness. And this Shays' Rebellion kind of really put the Articles under a microscope to show just how weak they were. This was a group of farmers in Massachusetts who had served in the Revolutionary War, and they were not receiving their veterans' pensions. They weren't getting paid what was owed them. And Daniel Shea led a rebellion of about 2,000 farmers, I believe it says. Yeah. And so this really intensified and magnified the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. So know about Shea's rebellion. But anyway, the convention is underway, and one of the most, well, I'm going to say the most influential delegate was James Madison. He was a delegate from Virginia. Matter of fact, you can still purchase his records of the convention. Very, very detailed. He is one of the main framers of the Constitution, and so he is known as the father of the Constitution. Madison and those who wanted a constitution were known as Federalists because they wanted a federal form of government. Federalism is basically a government that apportions power to a federal body or a national body, but also there's some shared powers with state bodies. And under the Articles of Confederation, there really wasn't a federal state, so to speak. Remember, there was just Congress, but they couldn't tax. They could not regulate trade between states. They couldn't have an army or a navy. So there really wasn't a federal government, so to speak. State governments were the supreme authority. So with a federal government or federalism, you're going to have a federal body that will govern the nation, and it will have more authority and power to influence the states, influence the economy, influence the military, and but also it will not become a completely it'll not be a completely federally dominated government. The states will still have their power and authority. It'll be a shared arrangement of power. In attendance at the Constitutional Convention, you had a group that were against federalism, and they were called by the creative name of anti-federalists. These were the ones who said the convention had crossed the line in deciding to rewrite or basically get rid of the Articles of Confederation. Even though in theory there would be basically shared power between the federal government and the state governments, the anti-federalists believed that the federal government would eventually do away with the state rights. They believed that the Constitution looked more like the monarchy of King George, and that the president would function more like a king. And the proposal at the time would be that the people would not select the president, but each state would elect what is called electors, and they would go to the federal gathering and form an electoral college, and they would vote in the president. So the Anti-Federalists said, no, that's that's too much power to this small group, and you're not letting the people have a say. So the convention continues on. And now this slide has information from pages 33 and 34 and 35, and you will want to know these three things for the exam. Led by the Virginia delegates, Edmund Randolph proposed what was called the Virginia Plan. You can see there how the government would be divided up. You would have a legislature, and it would be a bicameral legislature, which simply means it will have two houses. Bi means two. Cameral, a two-house or a two-chamber legislative system. But it would be based on a state's population. You would have an executive branch where you would have a president. They would have authority to basically make sure laws were executed. And then you would have a judicial branch, which would be a Supreme Court that is the highest court in the nation, along with some inferior courts. So this is the Virginia plan, or you can say this was the large state plan. The large state plan. You had a group called the New Jersey Plan that was proposed by William Patterson. And in their setup, the legislature would be unicameral. Uni means one, so a one chamber or one house legislator, where each state would be equally represented, just like in the Articles of Confederation. So once again, you would have a Congress made up of 13, unless they decided that each state got 2 people, but every state would have the same amount of representatives. Under the Virginia plan, Virginia would have more reps than Rhode Island because Virginia had more people. The difference between the New Jersey plan and the Articles of Confederation is that there would then be an executive office, but it would not be just one man or person serving as president. There would be a group that is chosen by Congress. And then the main thing about this executive branch under the New Jersey plan would be that they would appoint federal officials. Think about your Secretary of War, your Secretary of State, and then eventually a Secretary of Finance, a Postmaster General, people that would serve in federal positions. And then you would have also a Supreme Court, but only one single court, no other smaller courts. So the New Jersey plan, can you guess what it was called also? The opposite of the Virginia plan. This is the large state plan. This is the, I can hear you think, I can hear your thoughts. You're saying small state plan, yes. This is the small state plan. Not all state. Not 50%, something saves 50%. I've seen the commercials a ton of times and I can't remember it. So what happened during this constitutional convention? The Great Compromise was proposed on July 5th, 1787. Now, if you're thinking, I thought it was July 4th, remember that's Declaration of Independence 11 years ago, 1776. This is simply the Great Compromise being proposed in the Constitutional Convention by the Connecticut delegate Roger Sherman. How did they compromise? Well, they took from the Virginia plan that we're going to have a bicameral legislature. We're going to have two houses. They're going to be called the Senate and the House of Representatives. But then they took from both plans, the Senate is going to have the small state plan, and every state will be able to elect 2 senators. And you'll recall that our 2 senators in Oklahoma, James Langford and James Inhofe, or Jim Inhofe. So that was the Senate. But the other house, the House of Representatives, will follow the large state plan, and every state will have a number of representatives that is based on their population. So again, Oklahoma has 6 representatives today. I believe California has like 32. Texas has 28 or so. And so in the legislative body, the Senate reflects the small state plan, the New Jersey plan, and the House of Representatives reflects the Virginia plan or the large state plan. The executive branch in this system will be one president, instead of a group, and he will have power to appoint federal officials. And eventually, over time, we know that the president also chooses who will be his cabinet. And there's a lot more federal positions than there were in 1787. And then the Supreme Court system followed after the large state plan. There's one main Supreme Court, and then there are some regional federal courts. Today we hear them called like the Ninth Circuit Court or the Sixth Circuit Court. There are 12 circuit courts that are right underneath the Supreme Court. which basically means if you had a case that you took to court and eventually you went to the Oklahoma Supreme Court and they ruled in a way that you felt like was unfair, you could then appeal to, I think we're in the 6th or 7th district. We're in the 6th or 7th Circuit Court District, which is a federal court. And then if they ruled against you, then you could go to the Supreme Court of the United States. So that was the Great Compromise. Know these three things. Any questions on them? So under our Constitution, we have these three branches of government. The legislature made up of Congress, which is the Senate and the House of Reps. They are the branch of government that makes laws. President Trump, President Obama before him, President George W. Bush before Obama, President Clinton before George W. Bush, all the way back to George Washington, our first president under the Constitution. They have never made a law. Presidents do not make laws. The legislature or Congress makes laws. I think a lot of Americans don't understand that. And they think that, oh, if I get my president in, laws are going to change. But that's one reason why I said I believe Congress, even though there's supposed to be a balance, or there definitely is a separation, but in some things, Congress has a little bit more influence. The president and his cabinet, they are responsible to carry out the laws. The laws that Congress makes, the president sees that they're carried out. Then the court system evaluates the laws. The Supreme Court and other federal courts, again, there's 12 of them, they make sure that any new laws basically are constitutional. Now, in case you're not familiar with the Supreme Court, there are 9 justices or judges on the court. The Supreme Court justices are nominated by the president, but they must be approved by the Congress. President Trump, in his 3.5 years so far, has been able to have 2 judges. He nominated 2 judges, and they both have become Supreme Court justices. But not only does the Supreme Court make sure that these laws by Congress and the president are constitutional, but they also evaluate rulings and decisions that come to them from lower courts. A very good example of this in the last few years was the some states putting up the 10 Commandments on their state lawns or at their state grounds. And some people would sue the state and take it to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court would then review those cases and see if they are constitutional. And if the Supreme Court said no Ten Commandment displays, then the states had to follow suit. So a separation of powers. We also understand that these three powers would basically keep the other two in line. We call this checks and balances. If a president threatens to, if Congress passes a bill, the president can veto the bill. But then Congress, if they have enough votes, they can override the president's veto with their own veto. But then the Supreme Court can review everything and see who is right or wrong. They keep each other in line, or they're supposed to, so that no one branch becomes more powerful and abuses their power. A couple months ago, there was talk about if President Trump sends in federal troops to Seattle and Portland, to those cities where there were still protests, and there still are, they're still protesting. And the police and the city leaders in those cities are not doing anything to stop the protests and the destruction of property. And President Trump threatened to send federal troops in. Well, there were some people in Congress who said that would be an abuse of power. The president has no authority to do that. So that's kind of an example of the tension between the three branches and how they can keep each other in line. So we will stop there and finish the rest of chapter 2 on Wednesday. Do you have any questions about this material or these topics? Well, have a great rest of your Monday and Tuesday. Yes, sir.
I won't be able to come to class on Wednesday because we have benchmarking here at Howe for juniors.
For juniors?
Yes.
Anybody else a junior?
Callan and Raylan are.
Cheyenne and who?
Callan and Raylan.
Okay. All righty, I'll be sure to put it down as an excused absence.
All right, thank you.
All right, see you guys later.
Mr. Bean,
Yeah.
would you like us to do in-text citations or a citation page?
Just in text.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, yep. We will see y'all later.